Welcome to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. Legal issues simplified through real client stories and real-world experiences. Creating simplicity in 3, 2, 1.
Welcome back to Legal 123s with ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael Byrd.
Thanks, Brad. As a business and healthcare law firm, we represent clients in multiple business sectors, especially healthcare. This season, we are finding common ground for our audience, regardless of your background. Our theme is leadership, where each episode we'll talk about leadership from multiple perspectives.
Yeah, Michael, I'm excited today. We have a leader today whose profession is to coach and lead others. We have a pro, basically, on today's show.
Yeah, our guest even led the two of us and our ByrdAdatto management team through some leadership training. And Brad, you didn't even cause her to retire, which is a minor miracle, at least as far as I know.
I mean, she did put up with us or me, and even after all that, agreed to be on our podcast. I think it's kind of like a fungus. Like eventually, I just grow upon her. Maybe.
I don't know about that. I doubt it. I would say that it's a stretch that you're growing up at all. Brad.
Oh, that's a fair point. Yeah.
But before we get started, I've got an important question for you. Have you been following the growing concept in college football known as the transfer portal?
Yes, and it's fascinating and sometimes frustrating, the changes in how you follow college football now. And for those sci-fi fans that are listening, no, this is not some magical portal that sends a player to another dimension. Michael, I know you love context. Can you give some context on what is the portal?
Yes. So the transfer portal, or at least the current version of it and what we're hearing about in the news, has developed since the rules on the ability of a college athlete to transfer to another program has been relaxed.
Yes,
and so used to, you could transfer, but there was issues and you had to sit out for a while. And so there was a lot of red tape to make it happen. Now there's kind of a rocket fuel on this whole transfer portal because they've eased that. And an athlete can enter the transfer portal and go and play for another school the following year. And I think there's some rules to it, but it seems pretty easy to move back and forth. And now, of course, there's the issues about athletes getting paid, which I know you know a little bit about.
Yeah, and first off, for our audience members, yes, we have finally done it. We are now a sports podcast. And as a sport podcast, I should note that for those listening, there has been a huge shift. It used to be that athletes were prevented from selling their names, images, or likeness, or as Michael's tattoo says on the back, NIL is now gone. So this shift has allowed, for decades, the public and politicians and the athletes were really pushing hard so that they could use their NIL to make some money. And there's billions of dollars out there in the college world. And now these college athletes have their own NIL rights, which means legally they can accept money from businesses, or they can go out and promote themselves and get paid just for their own NIL.
I have dreams of building at the University of Texas like the best typing team in the country and using some of my income to make that happen.
$5 or $10 for those people.
Yes. Well, there are big stories every year about top athletes that are entering the transfer portal to go to another school.
All right, Michael, tell us some of these NIL portal challenge examples.
Yeah, so I read an article. I read a quote from the Nebraska head coach, Matt Rule, that said a good QB in the portal cost $1 million to $2 million in NIL commitments.
Okay, now to a movie reference here. As Mr. McGuire would say, show me the money.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. I don't think typos would cost that much, by the way.
No, I don't think so. It's like
but there is an untold dark side to this whole transfer portal thing. Like there's this market and all this money that's being rumored and thrown about, but I've read articles about the staggering statistics of kids who enter the portal and then they don't find a new team.
Ooh, that's really bad.
Yeah, like 2021, half the kids in the portal did not find a new school.
Ooh, terrible.
Yeah, so these kids, not only did they leave a program and not have a new one, most of them were on full scholarships. Oh. And so they lost their ability to get a college education because when you enter the portal, they lost their scholarship. And so there is this kind of untold side of this whole NIL transfer portal issue.
I wonder if they even know they're betting their scholarship that they're going to get a scholarship somewhere else, and then they lose it all. Both they didn't get picked up, and worse than that, they lost their actual scholarship.
I did read a random story recently because there's always a few randos, and one was the backup quarterback at Alabama who actually played this year.
Okay,
was the quarterback at Notre Dame.
Okay,
and he entered the transfer portal for lacrosse.
Yeah, I didn't see that coming at all.
Yeah, apparently he was highly coveted as a lacrosse recruit, and maybe he sees the handwriting on the wall on his football career and it's going to make a college sport shift.
Yeah, I guess if you have like a drive to play and you just want to find another sport and you're really good at it and you want to excel, why not? So what does this all have to do with our guest over here, and where are we going?
Well, hold tight.
Okay.
I've got one more story that I know you would like.
Okay.
The most interesting transfer I read about was the starting quarterback for Utah State. His name is Levi Williams, and he is leaving his school to become a Navy SEAL. Now, that's a pretty cool story about sacrifice.
Yeah.
He determined that with his age, the timeline to become a Navy SEAL, and the training it takes, that the time was now to do it. And he had a very successful year as the starting QB, and was going into would have been his senior year next year.
That's different. First off, what a cool name for a Navy SEAL, Levi Williams. I mean, I could just see that. Come on, Levi. And then second, that reminds me of another leader who played football, Pat Tillman. And for our audience member who's not familiar with Pat Tillman, he was a safety for the Arizona Cardinals. Is actually a really good safety. And after September 11th, he and his brother decided to join the Army. In fact, he actually turned down a $3.6 million offer, enlisted, eventually became an Army Ranger, and unfortunately, he was subsequently killed in a friendly fire incident. But it's a sad chapter, but it's an exhilarating concept of leadership that Pat showed.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing because it was. I remember at the time it was almost unheard of. I mean, he was, I think, Pro Bowl level.
Yeah, he was
safety.
Pro Bowl. That's right.
Well, it's time to get to our guest today, Brad. We are going to bring on our guest today. Joining us is our friend and one of our personal leadership Sherpas, Alyson Mattlage. She is the CEO of Robinson Training and Consulting. She has more than 25 years of corporate training and development on leadership. She's worked with large clients like Texas Instruments and Burlington Northern, Santa Fe, and as we said, the largest of her clients, ByrdAdatto.
Favorite by far.
Oh, my goodness.
By far.
Yeah. Welcome.
Hi. It's good to see you all.
Yes. All right, Alyson, we're going to hit you right up the front with a really tough question. Have you been following everything about this whole transfer portal and NIA and the college sports?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have a fun fact for you all. Speaking of the dark side of the transfer portal, the bright side, you may not realize this, but of the Heisman Trophy winners, 5 out of the last 6 or 7 are from transfer schools.
Yes.
Oh.
Including the most recent Heisman winner, the LSU quarterback.
Go Tigers.
But personally, so I'm a graduate of Baylor University, and we're hoping that many of our players are not flying into the portal as we are speaking, with just some tough challenges on the college football field this year.
You're more focused on basketball.
Yeah, we are a basketball school.
Yes, a very good basketball school.
For sure. So, yeah, I do love college football, and it's been fascinating to see both what NIL and the transfer portal has done, both in opportunity. And it's interesting that you say that thinking through, what if I don't get picked up? I mean, that's probably not a reality a lot of them either think about or want to face.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. And I'm also curious too if there's pressures created by the schools now to, like, people that aren't making it, where they're trying to push them out to go and look for new opportunities.
Yeah.
But anyway, I digress. So, Alyson, talk to us a little bit about your business, your clients, and just introduce us to what you do.
Yeah, so I, as you mentioned, have basically a leadership development consulting company, and I have a desire to help leaders maximize their potential. And so it's interesting because it started when I worked for Texas Instruments right out of college and kind of grew up there in my career. And then I had kids and was like, hey, I don't want to work as a full-time employee. I want to raise my kids. And I was introduced to this beautiful world of consulting that allowed you to both be at home and have a profession. And so for 20, plus years now, I've been in that space, and it's very rewarding.
So did you use like a transfer portal when you decided to do that? Yeah.
Totally. I just put myself right in that chute. Interestingly enough, I went to my boss at the time and I said, hey, I want one of those retirement packages that y'all hand out sometimes here at TI. And he's like, give me a break. Get out of my office. So I was trying to enter into the transfer portal, but.
Oh, well, it was you were ahead of your time.
Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
That's right.
Well, and Alyson, as Michael kind of started off this season, which is, believe it or not, our last episode of the season, we're really focusing on leadership. And as a leader, we'd love for you to be able to share some thoughts. But we're going to take a step back. And really, what was your first leadership role?
Yeah, so in thinking about that question, first leadership role that had an impact, I would probably say, I have to take you back to circa 1988, 1989.
That's Brad's favorite place. Yes. Yes.
Tell me what movie you're watching.
And y'all, I grew up as a ballet dancer, and when I moved to Texas from Newport Beach in junior high, and I realized very quickly that ballet wasn't like super cool. And as a junior high kid, you want to, move to that cool status. So as I went into high school, I hung up my point shoes and traded them for drill team boots. Now, I didn't realize in Texas, like high school football and the drill team, like that's a whole thing. And so I went the whole drill team route and became captain of my drill team. And what's interesting about that, it wasn't like just a popularity vote. Like there was a panel of judges and a whole process. But all that to say, in true seriousness, it's the first time I got a glimpse of what it meant to be a leader, where I was responsible for these girls that are my peers. And it was just, it was surreal. But I learned a lot about myself and leadership.
How did you feel like you did with that position?
Well, there were times where I was like, yeah, I'm killing it. And then there were other times where I had an amazing director who was gracious enough to give me feedback in a way that wasn't going to completely, shutter my esteem. But she was really helpful in walking that balance of these are your friends. So you have to be both fair and firm.
Right.
And I was like, so I learned a lot. And then, of course, I was 17 years old. I did a lot of stupid stuff.
What? At 17? We're still doing that, and Michael's like 102.
Well, I'm still just debating, like, well, if ballet wasn't all that cool, what do you think about my typing career?
I didn't want to bring that up, but yes. That wasn't cool either, Michael.
But I was a leader.
That's what counts.
Of my fingers.
Look at you today.
Yes, look at me today. Look how fast I can type. Well, excellent. Well, good. Well, that's let's stay there or stay in that time frame and just talk about, did you have anybody that you learned to be a leader from, or any mentors that kind of influenced your leadership development?
Yeah, so an easy one, of course, is my drill team director at the time. But what's interesting, and I didn't realize this until later in life, is my dad was a phenomenal, still is, phenomenal leader. So he was vice president of a retail company here in Dallas. And in the Christmas season and summers, he would make my brother and I work for the store, which I did not love. And at the time, I couldn't appreciate how great a leader that he was. And so seeing him in his element, and of course, this is many years later, he was so calm, he was confident, and he really cared about his people. They adored him. And at first I thought it was like, oh, I'm the boss's daughter. They're just saying that stuff to me. But I've seen it play out. And I think it goes back to his leadership. People just believed in him and wanted to follow him.
Do you think, was this before you became a leader on your drill team?
Yes.
Do you think that there was some osmosis happening where you had seen his behavior and you had some of that?
Yeah, that's an interesting thing that I don't know that I've really thought about. But I would bet that there were certain things that I saw in him that I just naturally emulated because, I mean, for example, and this is true in me observing him in the workplace, but also at home, I've never heard him raise his voice.
Wow.
And I'm not making that up when I say never. He's just so steady, calm, like no losing the temper. And so I think there were things that were modeled that I'd like to think that I took on as a leader.
I really wish that would be something that my kids could say about me.
Or the people who work here, Michael, for God's sake. Oh, wait, sorry.
Oh,
But
wait.
you're to blame for that. Right?
Yeah, stop yelling at me.
Yelling.
Speaking of terrible leaders,
Yeah.
obviously you had your dad and the drill instructor and everybody else who seemed like great mentors for you, but is there an experience that you can think of, and this can be any time, of where you saw either like the worst leadership experience or a style that you saw?
Yeah. Honestly, one of the worst leadership experiences comes pointed directly at me because when I worked for TI, they had a very common model where if you were good as an individual contributor, they're like, let's promote you to manager. Because clearly, if whatever you're doing as an individual contributor, you can do that well as a manager. So I was promoted well before I probably should have been. And that was also at a time where leadership development was not huge on the priority list. And I remember they asked me to hire my own administrative assistant. I had no idea what I was doing. I don't even know. I was like, well, I don't know how you hire a person. So I just interviewed. I was like, yeah, I think I like her. It was disaster. Within a few months, y'all, she had to be escorted out by security.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And I will spare the details of that. But it was one of those where the bad hire was on me because I didn't know what I was doing. But here was I say worst. I didn't ask for help because I wanted to prove that, you made the right decision in promoting me, even though I had no idea what I was doing. So that's one that just from my own experience that I'm like, But, okay, here's another one. Speaking of semiconductor company. And, of course, this gentleman is no longer at the company. But I don't know if you're aware, but, with semiconductors, they put them on a wafer. So it's this big, round, almost like a mirror. And this manager had one right next to his computer. So when people came in his office, he would stay typing and look and talk to you into the wafer, which worked like a mirror. I'm not even kidding. He's like, I'm just being efficient. He didn't even see anything wrong with it. Why would I turn around to talk to these people? And that has stayed in my mind. It was like, okay, first of all, it's problematic. Second of all, that you don't even see anything wrong with it. I'm staying here on my keyboard.
Did he go to Michael's school of typing for any particular reason?
Yes. Yeah, I have my iPad with, the selfie mode.
Selfie mode up.
Yeah, exactly.
So you just talk to people. I can't part from my keyboard.
Wow. That's a different style.
I'm curious, though.
Yeah.
As you were talking, I started thinking about, okay, you're a professional on teaching leadership. They don't teach you don't major in leadership in school. So what happened? Tell me, what was your first job, and how did that evolve into leadership, which then evolved into you going into the transfer portal to be a consultant?
Beam me up, Scotty. Okay, so what's interesting, this is another, I think, great story of just very fortunate in that what I went to school for, I'm doing nothing with right now. So I went into TI with a degree in physiology in their wellness department. That's back when big companies had, corporate wellness was a big thing.
Right.
And I hated it. And what's interesting is my manager at the time said, hey, they did these thing called brown bag lunches where people would come in for lunch and we'd do a presentation. They said, could you do a session on the physiology of stress? And so I did. And after that, my boss came up to me and said, you're in the wrong job. We're going to send you back to school. We're going to put you into our leadership development program and training. And that's when the whirlwind started, where they said, hey, we have a need as we're starting training and development focus here at TI. We think there could be a fit for you. So it was really, a manager seeing potential, and it was really just facilitation or presentation skills that started the whole learning about leadership.
I'm assuming this manager is not watching your presentation with the mirror.
With the mirror, that's right.
So it's different managers.
Different manager.
He was actually engaged with you.
Yes. Yeah.
And what was it just like the world opening up, learning that leadership, or did you have to kind of grow into it?
Yeah, all of the above.
Okay.
Yeah, it was learning by doing and my own leadership role and responsibility. It was also just observing. I mean, just watching really great leaders and then not so great leaders, and just seeing it evolve over time.
And so what would you say is your leadership style?
Yeah, I think that, well, what I would say my style is today is definitely collaborative in my approach. I started out as directive, where and I can remember, y'all, because again, I told you I was promoted before I should have been. I can remember one of my employees coming into my office one day, and she was like, hey, it'd be really helpful if you asked me to do something instead of just telling me. And I'm like, what's the difference? Do your work. But what she was trying to say is show some respect, involve me, ask. And at the time I couldn't see it. I didn't have the maturity to see, but over time, thankfully, I really value that I don't have to have all the answers. Thank goodness. And I try to surround myself with talented, smart people, and just invite their ideas.
I'm starting to see some of the lessons you taught us come out.
I was going to say, ask versus tell.
Ask versus tell. Yeah, where have I heard that before?
I heard that one. Alyson figured it out on her own.
Yes, early on.
Yeah. Well, so, again, going back to just, you're being a professional leader, and what are some of the areas of concern that you think others should be mindful of or often missed when they're trying to be leaders?
I think probably one, there's several that come to mind, but the one that is consistent, no matter what industry or what level leader is leading or navigating change. It is, I think, my observation, what tends to get underestimated is how we treat change like it's an event versus a transition. So we focus on the logic side of it versus the emotional side of it and what people are experiencing. And so we create these great comms plans for that's how we need to communicate it and roll it out and announce the change. And then we just expect that everybody is committed and on board. And I think that leaves a lot of challenge following the announcement or what they would hope is the implementation of the change.
That's really interesting. So talk a little bit more about emotions and how, just connected to leadership and how leaders should think about that. Yeah. So
if you think about it from the perspective of you have a cognitive domain and an emotional domain when leading change. And everybody starts in the cognitive domain space. Hey, effective June 1, we are eliminating this process, or we're merging these two jobs, or whatever it may be.
Right.
Immediately, most people don't stay in that cognitive space. They slide into the emotion. The emotion could be frustration, excitement, just depending on whatever it is you're announcing. What they stay in that emotional state, feeling their own emotion, but usually investigating what's in it for me, what's happening, how is this good, how is this not good, and then ultimately they get back to kind of that logic or cognitive space where it becomes more of a routine. But as managers, we rarely have conversations at that emotional space. We stay at the logic level of it.
And so the lesson learned for us is to be able to connect at the emotions level.
Yeah, and just even having sessions where it's purely just, I'm here to listen. Yeah. I'm not going to try to sell you. I'm not going to try to convince you on this change. I'm not going to provide a bunch of data that says why we're doing it, which you need all that. But when people are in that reaction stage, just to let it be okay, because the more you push and try to convince, the more some of them are going to dig in.
So maybe ask them instead of telling them.
Yes.
Man, this is feeling
Look
like
at that.
Or why am I talking?
Why am I talking? Exactly. I'm just here
We're
to
just
listen.
showing off. Yes. Okay, well, as we get here, I have one kind of final speed round question for
Yeah.
you. So, what's the biggest lesson learned? It can be positive or negative that you can share with our audience on leadership.
Biggest lesson is connect with people, hands down. Like I believe leaders consistently underestimate the connection that they make with people, the impact that it has. And I'm talking small things. Like, so for example, one of my clients, BNSF, is a massive railroad operation. And they started talking to different leaders and their employees. And these employees were raving about this one leader. We'll call him Tom. And when they started asking the employees, what is it about him? They said things like, he knows my name. He knows my family. He thanks me even when I'm doing the job I'm supposed to be doing. And this is what's creating connection, where these people are like, I trust him because he cares.
That's really cool. Alyson, thank you for joining us.
Yes,
it was
thank
amazing.
y'all.
Let's go into commercial, and on the other side, we'll come in with a couple of legal insights, but really grateful for you coming today.
I'm grateful for y'all and all that you're doing in your leadership. Your firm is fortunate to have both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Many business owners use legal counsel as a last resort rather than as a proactive tool that can further their success. Why? For most, it's the fear of unknown legal costs. ByrdAdatto's Access Plus program makes it possible for you to get the ongoing legal assistance you need for one predictable monthly fee. That gives you unlimited phone and email access to the legal team, so you can receive feedback on legal concerns as they arise. Access Plus, a smarter, simpler way to access legal services. Find out more. Visit ByrdAdatto.com today.
Welcome back to Legal 123 to the ByrdAdatto. I'm your host, ByrdAdatto, with my co-host, Michael. Now, Michael, this season our theme is leadership. And we had a pro in here. Alyson came in and really dropped some incredibly good knowledge about how to become a leader. And, at the end, obviously the whole first half was amazing, but she said something I think it resonated with both of us about that emotional connection that you can make and how that can impact your employees. And let's just park there for a second, because it's more than that. Being a great leader, there's just connections you can make emotionally with everyone.
Yeah, I think over the course of this entire season, hearing some great thoughts on leadership, I love how she distilled it down to the connection that people make with each other.
Yeah.
And I think about stepping back from leadership and what we do for a living, which is we're helping give counsel to business owners. Mm-hmm. And part of that is managing risk. And for many of our clients who are medical practices, their biggest, quote, risk, using that very objectively, is their patients and their employees, right? Their biggest opportunity, they're in the business of serving and treating patients, and they need employees to do it. But if something were to go wrong, that's where it's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And what you and I think, have noticed is that our clients that do a really good job of forming a connection with their patients or forming a connection with their employees also reduce their risk of lawsuits happening or escalated unmet expectations coming to the surface, and that they tend to just have smoother relationships and smoother experiences in running their business.
Yeah, absolutely. There's an element to it, because there's a connection that you've been kind to that patient, or you've established a personal relationship with that patient, that when there is a dispute, they feel at least that there's a good enough connection personally to reach out to. Same with your employees. We've seen that where there's an employee dispute, and when they have a really good relationship with that employee, it tends to de-escalate quicker, when they realize, oh, that was just a little bump or whatever it was, and because we've had such a good connection, they had a higher trust level between the parties. But Michael, believe it or not, we're almost done with this. Any final thoughts?
It's been an amazing season, learning about leadership, and because you've tried your hardest to form a connection with me, Brad, I will not enter the transfer portal, and I'll stay with you for another season.
Yes. Well, audience members, as Michael said, this is the last episode of season 14 and of the year. We'll be off next week, so hopefully everyone have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we'll be back with you with a season 15 preview on January 3rd. Until then,
Happy holidays.
Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, if you like this episode, please subscribe, make sure to give us a 5-star rating, and share with your friends.
You can also sign up for the ByrdAdatto newsletter by going to our website at ByrdAdatto.com.
ByrdAdatto is providing this podcast as a public service. This podcast is for educational purposes only. This podcast does not constitute legal advice, nor does it establish an attorney-client relationship. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by ByrdAdatto. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Please consult with an attorney on your legal issues.